have a love-hate relationship with jokes about Unitarian Universalism. Some, I think, are funny because they really do have a grain of truth in them, and we need to be able to laugh at ourselves. But then there are those that are painful because they're perhaps how others who do not understand us see us. For instance, some of you, if you're Simpsons fans, might recall an episode of The Simpsons that opens with an ice cream festival at the church of the rather fundamentalist minister, Reverend Lovejoy. So Lisa's listing the ice creams available at Reverend Lovejoy's table. Wow, look at all these flavors. There's Blessed Virgin Berry, Command Mint, Bible Gum, and Reverend Lovejoy hands Lisa a bowl, and he said, or if you prefer, we have Unitarian ice cream. And Lisa looks into the bowl and says, there's nothing there. And Reverend Lovejoy crosses his arms smugly and says, exactly. I know it's funny, and we sort of chuckle at it, but it's not really funny, at least to me, because this is one of those myths about our faith, that somehow we're neither this nor that, just some vague amalgam of people who like to drink coffee and do good in the world and don't really know who they are, what they believe, or why they are Unitarian Universalists. So let me say clearly, everyone is welcome here. We are in community because we share key ethical and spiritual values. And we do have a freedom of belief, but that freedom of belief is only up to a certain point and with a few caveats. One caveat is that we are a covenanted community. We don't have dogmas or creedal tests that we make people pass before they can join us, but we do have a covenant of how we agree to treat each other as individuals in this community. At Live Oak, we call it our covenant of good relations, and we work hard, each and every one of us, or we should be working hard, each and every one of us, to live up to this covenant that we have all agreed to for the health and well-being of all people, for our community. We covenant to agree to these rules of civility and kindness and constructive communication. Another caveat is not everyone is going to be comfortable being a Unitarian Universalist. Go figure, right? We have a very broad tent of theological and multiple other kinds of diversity, but I don't imagine that somebody who, say, belongs to the KKK would be very happy here for very long. I don't think anyone who belongs to any group or has values, I don't even think I can call it a value, who has thoughts about oppressing other people, I don't think they would be very welcome here. So in this way, we're intolerant of intolerance. Which brings me to the third caveat, and this is a really big bugaboo in my book. How many people have heard other people say, or maybe even yourself, you can believe anything you want as a Unitarian Universalist? Have you ever heard anyone say that? No, no, and no. I'm giving fair notice that I hope to never hear those words spoken at Live Oak or beyond by any of our members or friends. When we say that our church has freedom of belief, we mean that in a limited way. You're free to believe whatever you want here, but only as long as it helps you live a caring and humane life, or at least doesn't prevent you from living a caring and humane life. That's a very real limitation on freedom of belief. You cannot believe anything you want as a Unitarian Universalist. Our faith has a long and rich heritage. Our historical beliefs that God is one and all are saved are heresies, were heresies in their time. And those professing those beliefs, such as, go figure, being a free thinker, they were tortured, imprisoned, killed for those beliefs. David Eccles, where are you, David? I know you're here somewhere. There you are. Kindly brought in a sign that he has out in front of the table when he's over at UC Santa Barbara. And it has famous Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists on it. Very interesting. Take a look at that. It's really a point of pride. How many famous people, and that's only some of them. I could probably name some more that aren't there, but it gives you a good sense of how rich our heritage is. I have this book called This Day in Unitarian Universalist History, which is a not-so-quick romp through 600 years of significant milestones in our religious tradition. So just one example, it goes day by day. So this day, September 27th, in 1616, the Unitarian Church in Rakow, Poland, sent Peter Stratorius III and John Lunkwitz to Altorf, Germany, to help free Unitarian students who were imprisoned for their beliefs. We've been at this a long time, my friends. We stand in the stream of this living tradition, a theology that changes, but it takes tolerance and compassion and the inherent worth of all and interdependence and growth of our spiritual selves and the health of our planet and all that inhabit it, and so much more, and together forms this into our living faith of substance that each of us should be able to understand and explain to others. Our faith as a whole is a composite version of the quote that's in our orders of service today that says, "Traveler, there is no road. You build the road as you walk." Each of us individually makes our path, our own decisions on our journey. And just as we do this on an individual level, we do this as Unitarian Universalists in a movement. But we're guided and framed by our history, by core beliefs that hold steady through time. One expression of our living history is found in our 6 sources. This is an acknowledgement of who we are and from where our living tradition draws its source. Our faith comes from direct experience of mystery and wonder, the words and deeds of prophetic women and men challenging us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions, Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings of science, and the guidance of reason. These 6 sources are our tap roots, sources of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And then we have our core beliefs that have taken the form of our Unitarian Universalist principles, the core ethical stances that provide a center for our self-understanding. These principles are not set in stone either. In fact, the 4th principle, our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, carries the seeds of its own obsolescence. We, as a whole association of congregations, review our principles periodically, and we decide whether we think that they're still a valid expression of our living faith. So you didn't know that when you were coming to church this morning, you were going to have a pop quiz. But you are. Okay. but I'm not going to single people out. So this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to play a game. You guys seen game shows, right? Okay, so this is our version of a game show. And I'm going to ask you to come up with all 7 principles. No cheating, no pulling out your phones, no looking at the gray hymnals, okay? And we'll see which section wins. We're going to do it section by section, okay? So first, you don't have to go in order. You don't have to go in order. In fact, let me cross off. I'm optimistic. I'm actually going to cross off as you come up with them. So this section over here, can you name one of our Unitarian Universalist principles? If you can, raise your hand. Okay, Helen, I saw yours up first.
The inherent dignity and worth of every human being.
Yes, that is our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You guys get a point. Second section, can someone name? Okay, see a hand up?
Democratic process.
Right, exactly. That is the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and society at large. All right, you guys are on the hot seat. Oh, look at that. David's ready to go.
Respect for the interconnected web of life.
Very good. Our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Good. All right, you guys each have a point. Back to this section. Oh, okay.
Free and responsible service.
Someone was paying attention. Our 4th principle, good job. All right, this section. Al.
Justice, equity, compassion in all human interactions.
Perfect. Got it. Our 2nd principle. All right, the pressure's on. Who can name? Oh, way in the back. All right.
Acceptance of one another, encouragement to spiritual growth within our congregations and society at large.
Rocking it. Woo! Word for word. You got that, Crystal. Thank you. All right, there's one more left. This is the bonus point. This is the tiebreaker. Can anyone name our last principle? Okay.
Working for justice, peace, and equality.
Very close. We'll give it to Helen. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. All right, give yourselves a hand. Good job, good job. It's not that easy. I think I've told you before that when people ask me to say all 7, I sing the children's song in my brain because it's easier to remember. So when the, what's that? Oh, heck no, you do not want that. I'll have the kids sing it for you, okay? Another time. So when the 2 strands of our faith movement merged together in 1961, they arrived at our original principles and purposes after negotiation and debate that came close to derailing the whole process of consolidating the Unitarians, Universalists into one Unitarian Universalist association. But when we reformed our principles in 1984, it was amazingly amicable, with maximum participation and dialogue, total transparency in the process, and I'm looking, there might be some of you who actually went through this process, repeated General Assembly, so year after year of talking about it and chewing on it. And what's even more amazing is that those principles have remained virtually unchanged for 30 years. To a truly astonishing extent, our principles have been woven into the fabric of our denominational life. And I think it's important to note that in 1984, the changes and the process that came about were in large part led by women who felt that the UUA principles at the time not only failed to affirm them as women, but they also failed to indicate a respect for the wholeness of life and for the earth. So while most of the wording for the current principles was new in 1984, many of the concepts appeared in one form or another in the original 1961 statement. That is, except for our principle number 7, which is? Right, our interdependence, interconnected web. And that one was added actually a decade later. And it was actually something that was mandated by grassroots, by congregations and fellowships and churches. And at least the source that I read said that the current wording emerged from the floor of the General Assembly, where it was instantly recognized as just the right language, which to me is kind of amazing. That we didn't take years and years to come up with it, that it came up and everyone just said, yes, there we are. A historian wrote, "Apart from Quakers and their time-honored preference for consensus, it is unlikely that the history of religion provides any comparable example of such intentional and committed use of inclusive, non-hierarchical processes to produce a guiding statement." So we should be very, very proud of those principles. So we have our rich history, we have our name itself, a little unwieldy to say, but we have our living history right in our name, and we have our principles and purposes, as they're called, and we also have our symbol. Anybody tell me what our symbol is?
Flaming chalice.
Flaming chalice. So people have asked me about the flaming chalice, so I thought, okay, we're talking about UU identity. Our flaming chalice combines two archetypes, a drinking vessel and a flame. And I love the story of how this important symbol of our faith came to be. And much of what I'm going to say in this section is actually part of a wonderful pamphlet, so by Dan Hotchkiss. Those who've been on a board or are on the board recognize the name Dan Hotchkiss. He's a very busy man, I guess. The chalice and flame were brought together as a Unitarian symbol by the Austrian artist Hans Deutsch in 1941. He was living in Paris in the 30s, and when he was living in Paris, he drew critical cartoons of Adolf Hitler. And when the Nazis invaded Paris in 1940, he abandoned all he had and he fled, eventually landing up in Portugal. There he met the Reverend Charles Joy, Executive Director of the Unitarian Service Committee. The Service Committee was brand new. It was founded in Boston to assist Eastern Europeans, among them Unitarians as well as Jews, who needed to escape Nazi persecution. And so from his Lisbon headquarters, Joy oversaw this secret network of couriers and agents. Now, the USC was an unknown organization. It was brand new at the time. That's what gave it birth in 1941. And being unknown was a special handicap in this cloak and dagger world where establishing trust quickly across barriers of language, nationality, and faith could mean the difference between life or death. And so Joy asked Hans Deutsch to create a symbol for their papers, to make them look official, to give dignity and importance to them, and at the same time to symbolize the spirit of the work that was being done. And so it was that Hans Deutsch made his lasting contribution to the Unitarian Service Committee, and as it turned out, to all of Unitarian Universalism. With just a pencil and ink, he drew a chalice with a flame. And the flaming chalice design was made into seal for papers and a badge for agents moving refugees to freedom. In time, it became our symbol of Unitarian Universalism all around the world. And the story of Hans Deutsch reminds us that the symbol of a flaming chalice stood in the beginning for a life of service. When he designed the flaming chalice, he had never seen a Unitarian or Universalist church or even heard a sermon. What he had seen was faith in action, people who were willing to risk their lives to help others in a time of urgent need. And today our flaming chalice is the official symbol of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and hundreds. I've never been in a congregation that doesn't have a chalice up front nowadays. And perhaps most importantly, it's become a focal point for our worship. And I have to tell you that as I was thinking about this service, knowing that I was going to talk about the symbolism of our chalice, I thought, wouldn't it be great to offer the opportunity for all of us to make chalices, to be able to take them home into our own homes? So, of course, I do what anybody else does. I Googled, right? And I Googled how to make a chalice. And it brought up how to make a coconut chalice. And I thought, well, you know, that's an interesting idea. And then I read a bit further and realized that a coconut chalice is really a bong. So, so we are not making coconut chalices, sorry. Gotta love Google. But that does lead us into the second part of our sermon. We've explored these key parts of our heritage, which are important for all of us to know and understand, especially as a background to each of us answering the question of who you are, what you believe, and why you are a Unitarian Universalist. One of the greatest gifts of our UU community is that of openness and love and affirmation, of being this covenanted community, not perfect, but dedicated to living out our religious values both here and in the world, of others who offer themselves in ways that not just allow, but actually encourage us to be our true selves, and even more than that, who encourage us to be better versions of ourselves. And here I'm talking about a group of people who don't just tolerate each other, but actively affirm and support each other. But it's not just about us. There's a whole world of people who would love to hear the life-saving message of our faith. And it's up to us to share what we've found here. So today, I'm leaving you with 3 homework assignments. Well, I'll call them homework opportunities. The first one is examine how visible your faith is in your life. And by this, I mean it literally. This time, I talk a lot about living our faith in your actions, but this time, I mean, how visible is it literally? How many of us wear chalice jewelry or a pin that has a chalice on it that might spark a conversation about Unitarian Universalism? And another aspect to consider is how visible is your Unitarian Universalist identity in your home? I have to say that some of you know that I'm in the process of searching for a new house here in Goleta. So I've spent a lot of time in the past weeks walking through people's homes. And it's really amazing when you walk into the home of somebody who you don't know, how you can get a really good sense of who they are by what books, by what they have on their walls, what is visible. So this is a challenge and a sort of a homework assignment for you is go home. Look at both what you have in your home where you welcome your family, your friends, your neighbors. Make sure that your Unitarian Universalist identity is visible. You could have the 7 principles. You could have a chalice. There's all kinds of things. Drew, you're laughing at me, but it's so true. I have the 7 principles in my home. It's actually a wonderful tool. It's a conversation starter. So the second homework opportunity, what do you say after you tell someone that you're a Unitarian Universalist and they ask, what's that? The elevator speech, or how to talk about our faith in 60 seconds or less. I think that the only way is to find something that resonates with you. I looked at a bunch of elevator speeches. You can Google it, it's online. None of them spoke to me. I don't think I could just take one and call it my own. And so instead, I'm going to give you a couple guidelines for creating your own UU elevator speech. So, 2 ideas. One is our well-known 3-part statement. This is the church of the open mind, of the loving heart, the helping hands. We are free-thinking mystics with hands. We search for truth with an open mind, love our neighbor as ourself, and we make the world a better place, which includes working for justice, peace, and freedom for all people. Mind, heart, hands. That I can remember. It's really easy, and you can just frame your elevator speech with those three things. A second way to frame this is using our Unitarian Universalist principles. Our first, sixth, and seventh principles are the pillars of what we stand for. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the goal of community with peace, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So you've got the 7 principles, and you have sort of your first one, and then 6 and 7 that sort of frame who we are. And then the other 4, they're important, but they talk about how we're going to get to those 3. So that's a second way that you might be able to frame what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist, is go to those principles. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug right now that if you would like to know more about your Unitarian Universalist identity, I invite you to join us for the upcoming class that I'm going to be facilitating. It's a twice-a-month class called Harvest the Power, and there's information in your electronic acorns, and I think the deadline for signing up comes next week. Hope to see you all there. Oh, it's also in the purple acorn. Great, thank you. Okay, so those are your 2 homework opportunities: visible Unitarian Universalist identity, elevator speech, and here's your third. As part of our sharing and stewardship that'll come after we hear the beautiful musical response, we're going to be passing out baskets of business cards with Live Oak's information printed on them. And so you are invited to take as many as you think that you can use and hand these out to people in your everyday life. You can also write your name and number if you're really motivated on the back and you want them to be able to contact you. But I run into people and I talk about Unitarian Universalism. Can you tell I'm kind of passionate about it? So I love to have these. You know, I hand out my business cards as a minister, but these are cards that everyone can take with them. And as you come up to somebody who you think might be interested, hand them out. Be brave. Know that we have something amazing here that others might be hungry to welcome into their lives. Work on making your faith visible in your life. Offer that elevator speech, whether you're trapped in an elevator or not. Hand out the cards inviting others to be part of what you have found here at Live Oak. And we sing it each week. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Shine on. May it be so. Our faith, this congregation, is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time or death or the space between the stars. Let us pause in silent witness to that unity. And may the blessings of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. Blessed be, so be it. Namaste. And now we extinguish the light of our communal chalice, and now is when our service truly begins. And the congregation responds. We carry